I was staring at my empty driveway when I realized something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. My plow truck, all 8,000 pounds of it with the custom mayor's blade attached, was gone. Not stolen, towed, during the worst blizzard to hit northern Massachusetts in 15 years. My name is Henry Iverson, and I run a small snow removal business in Graymont, a town about 40 miles north of Boston. That February morning started like any other emergency snow day. The National Weather Service had upgraded the storm to a blizzard warning around 3 in the morning, and my phone had been buzzing nonstop with clients needing their driveways cleared so they could get to work at the hospital, the fire station, or just make it to the pharmacy for their medications. I had been up since 2, preparing my route, checking my equipment, making sure I had enough fuel and washer fluid. Everything was perfect. Except now my truck was gone. I stood there in my driveway, wearing my heavy Carhartt jacket and boots, snowflakes pelting my face as the wind howled. My neighborhood, Westridge Commons, was one of those newer developments with cookie-cutter colonials and strict HOA rules. I had known moving here 3 years ago was a risk given my line of work, but the house was perfect for my family, and I had specifically checked with the HOA about my commercial vehicle before purchasing. They had said it was fine as long as the truck was kept clean and professional looking. My wife Sarah came to the door, our 6-year-old daughter Emma peeking around her legs. "Henry, what's wrong? Where's the truck? It's gone. Someone towed it." I pulled out my phone, my fingers already numb from the cold, and dialed the police non-emergency line. They told me to check with the HOA first, as they handle parking enforcement in private communities. The HOA office was a small building at the entrance of our development, barely bigger than a shed. I trudged through the 8 inches of snow that had already accumulated, my breath coming out in angry puffs of steam. The lights were on inside, which meant Karen Eckhart, our HOA president, was already there. Of course she was. That woman lived for finding violations. I pushed open the door, snow tumbling in with me. Karen sat behind her desk, sipping coffee from a mug that said, HOA, helping our awesome community. She was in her late 40s, with that specific haircut that seemed to be standard issue for people in her position, short and angular. She looked up at me with pursed lips. "Mr. Iverson, what can I do for you?" Her tone suggested she already knew why I was there and was enjoying it. "Where's my truck, Karen? I have emergency calls. People need their driveways plowed." She set down her coffee with deliberate slowness. "Your commercial vehicle was towed at 6 this morning for violation of Section 12.4 of the Community Bylaws. Commercial vehicles over 1 ton are not permitted to be parked in resident driveways overnight." "That's insane. I've lived here for 3 years. You approved my truck." "That was under the previous board. We reviewed all commercial vehicle exemptions last month and sent out notices. Yours was revoked." She slid a piece of paper across her desk. "It was dated 3 weeks ago, addressed to my house. I never got this." I was trying to keep my voice level, but rage was building in my chest like a pressure cooker. "That's not my problem. The notice was sent certified mail. You're required to check your mail." I pulled out my phone and showed her the weather radar. Solid red and purple covered our entire region. "Karen, this is a blizzard, a state of emergency. I have contracts with the town, with businesses, with elderly residents who can't get out without their driveways cleared. Where's my truck? Impound lot on Route 17. Benson's Towing. You can retrieve it once you pay the $250 towing fee plus daily storage, and it cannot return to this property." This is unbelievable. I was shaking now, and not from the cold. "You towed my work truck during a declared state of emergency." She folded her hands on her desk. The HOA board takes the rules seriously, Mr. Iverson. If we make exceptions for you, we have to make them for everyone. Now, if you don't mind, I have other matters to attend to. I left before I said something that would get me in more trouble. The walk back to my house felt twice as long. Sarah met me at the door with my keys and her car keys. "Take my SUV," she said. "I called the towing company. Your truck is there, but they won't release it without payment and they're cash or check only. The plow mounting is custom fitted to my truck. I can't just swap it to your car." I ran my hands through my hair, snow melting and dripping down my neck. "I have 12 calls already. Mrs. Patterson needs to get to her dialysis appointment. The fire station needs their lot cleared." My phone rang. It was Tom Crawford, the fire chief. "Henry, where are you? We need the station lot done now. We can't get the trucks out properly." I explained the situation. The silence on the other end was heavy. "You're telling me the HOA towed your plow truck during a blizzard?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. That's got to be illegal. Let me make some calls." He hung up. I got my checkbook and headed to Benson's Towing in Sarah's SUV. The roads were treacherous, visibility maybe 50 feet in the whiteout conditions. It took me 40 minutes to make a drive that should have taken 15. The impound lot was a muddy mess of partially plowed snow and dirty vehicles behind a chain-link fence. The office was a grimy trailer with a space heater that barely worked. The guy behind the counter, whose name tag said Rick, barely looked up from his phone. "I'm here for my truck. Ford F-350 with a plow. Name, Henry Iverson." He typed slowly with 2 fingers, hunting and pecking. "Yeah. $250 for the tow, $50 for 1-day storage, comes to $300 total. It hasn't been here a full day. Day starts when we tow it. Company policy." I wrote the check, my hand shaking with anger. He printed out a release form and slid it across the counter with a clipboard. As I was signing, the door opened and a woman in a state police uniform walked in, stomping snow off her boots. "Rick, I need to talk to you about that F-350 you towed from Westridge this morning." She noticed me and extended her hand. "Trooper Melissa Hendricks. You're Henry Iverson?" "Yes, madam." Fire Chief Crawford called this in. "Mr. Iverson, do you have active contracts for snow removal during declared emergencies?" "I do." "With the town, the fire department, 3 medical practices, and about 30 residential clients. Half of them are elderly or disabled." She turned to Rick. "You towed an emergency services vehicle during a declared state of emergency. HOA called it in. We just do the towing." Rick's bored expression was finally shifting to concern. "Who authorized the tow?" Trooper Hendricks pulled out a notepad. "Karen Eckhart. She's the HOA president." I pulled up the notice on my phone that I had photographed at the HOA office. "She said my truck violates their bylaws." The trooper's expression darkened as she read. "Mr. Iverson, I'm going to need you to come with me to the state police barracks after you get your truck. This might be obstruction of emergency services, which is a crime under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 268, Section 13. We need to file a formal report." Rick suddenly found some energy. "Here's your keys. You're good to go." I got my truck and followed Trooper Hendricks to the barracks in Haverhill. The drive took over an hour in the conditions. Inside, the building was warm and efficient, with that specific government building smell of floor wax and coffee. She led me to a small office where I gave a formal statement about the situation, providing my contracts, the HOA notice, and documentation that I had originally been approved for the commercial vehicle. "This is serious, Mr. Iverson," she said as she typed up my statement. "During a declared state of emergency, interfering with emergency services is a criminal offense. Snow removal for fire departments, medical facilities, and vulnerable populations qualifies as emergency services. What happens now? I'm forwarding this to the district attorney's office and to the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. They'll investigate. In the meantime, you're free to park your truck wherever you need to in order to perform your contracted services. If the HOA tries to tow it again, call 911 immediately. I thanked her and headed out. It was already past noon. I had lost half a day of work. My phone showed 23 missed calls. I started on my route, beginning with Mrs. Patterson's house. The dear woman was in her 80s and stood at her window, waving frantically as I cleared her driveway in long, practiced passes. She came out as I was finishing. Oh, Henry, I was so worried. I called the ambulance transport and they said they couldn't get down my road. Then Tom Crawford called and told me what happened. That woman should be ashamed. Don't worry about it, Mrs. Patterson. You're all set now. I helped her to the ambulance that had been waiting at the end of her street, watching her safely loaded before moving to my next job. The fire station took an hour. The snow was coming down faster than I could clear it, but I made 3 passes and got them operational. Chief Crawford came out to check the work. Henry, I'm sorry about this morning. I made some calls. This is going higher than local police. The governor's office is involved now. The governor? I stopped mid-scoop, snow cascading off my blade. Yeah. Apparently, interfering with emergency services during a declared state emergency gets their attention, especially when it's an HOA doing it for petty reasons. Keep your phone on you. I worked until midnight, clearing driveways and parking lots, my back screaming and my eyes burning from exhaustion. Sarah had kept dinner warm and Emma had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for me. I carried her up to bed, kissed her forehead, and collapsed into my own bed still in my work clothes. The next morning, my phone rang at 7. Unknown number with a Boston area code. Mr. Iverson. This is Michael Romano from the governor's office. Governor Patricia Mills would like to speak with you regarding the incident with your HOA. Is now a good time? I sat up so fast I nearly threw out my back. Yes. Now is fine. There was a brief hold, then a woman's voice came on the line. I recognized it from news conferences. Governor Mills had been elected 2 years ago on a platform of practical governance and cutting red tape. Mr. Iverson, good morning. I heard about what happened to you yesterday. I want you to know that this is completely unacceptable. During a state of emergency, we need our essential service providers able to do their jobs, not fighting with their HOAs. Thank you, Governor. I appreciate you looking into this. I'm not just looking into it, I'm fixing it. First, I've instructed the Attorney General's office to investigate whether criminal charges are warranted against the HOA board members who authorized this action. Second, I'm working with the legislature to introduce emergency legislation that will prevent HOAs from interfering with licensed emergency service providers. And third, I'm personally ensuring that your HOA board is replaced. I must have been silent too long because she continued. Mr. Iverson. Are you there? Yes, madam. I'm just surprised. I never expected this to go this far. HOAs serve a purpose, but they're not above the law and they certainly don't get to endanger public safety for petty rule enforcement. My office will be in touch with more details. In the meantime, park your truck wherever you need to and refer any complaints to my office. I'm serious about that. Here's my chief of staff's direct number. She gave me the number and hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone in disbelief. Sarah came in with coffee. Who was that? The governor. She nearly dropped the mug. The actual governor. Yeah. She said she's having the HOA board replaced and working on legislation. The next few days were surreal. News vans showed up in Westridge Commons, interviewing neighbors about the HOA. The story went viral on social media. I started getting interview requests from local and national news outlets. I did a few, keeping my comments measured and factual. Karen Eckhart refused to comment, but that didn't stop reporters from camping outside the HOA office. The following Monday, I received a call from the Attorney General's office. An assistant AG named David Park wanted to meet with me. We met at a coffee shop in Graymont, away from the media circus at my house. "Mr. Iverson, we've completed our preliminary investigation." He opened a folder on the table between us. The HOA board violated several laws. First, Massachusetts General Law Chapter 268, Section 13, obstruction of emergency services during a declared emergency. That's a misdemeanor carrying up to a year in jail and a $1,000 fine. Second, they violated their own bylaws by not providing proper notice of the policy change. Third, and this is where it gets interesting, we found evidence of selective enforcement. What do you mean? Karen Eckhart's husband owns a landscaping business. He parks commercial vehicles at their house all the time, bigger than your truck. The HOA never towed them. That's discrimination and abuse of authority. So, what happens now? We're filing criminal charges against Karen Eckhart, Vice President Douglas Whitmore, and Secretary Janet Russo. They'll be arraigned next week. We're also working with the state HOA Oversight Board to dissolve the current board and force new elections. The arraignment was packed with media. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as Karen, Douglas, and Janet were processed through. They each pled not guilty and were released on personal recognizance. Karen's lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to argue that they were just enforcing the rules, but the judge wasn't having it. "You towed an emergency services vehicle during a blizzard," Judge Martinez said, peering over her glasses. "This isn't about HOA rules. This is about public safety." Trial is set for May 15th. Defendants are ordered not to participate in any HOA activities pending resolution of this case. The Massachusetts legislature moved fast on the Emergency Services Protection Bill. By March, it had passed both chambers and the governor signed it in a ceremony at the State House. I was invited to attend. Standing behind Governor Mills as she signed the bill into law was one of the stranger experiences of my life. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the governor made a speech about the importance of protecting emergency services and holding HOAs accountable. This bill ensures that licensed emergency service providers, including snow removal contractors, tow truck operators, and utility workers, cannot be prevented from parking their vehicles or performing their duties during declared emergencies, she said. HOAs that violate this law will face significant penalties, including dissolution of the board and state oversight. After the ceremony, she pulled me aside. "How are things in your neighborhood?" "Tense. A lot of my neighbors are supportive, but some think I made too big a deal out of this." "You didn't. What they did was dangerous and illegal. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for standing up for yourself and your community." The trial in May was relatively quick. The prosecution presented evidence of the tow, the emergency declaration, my contracts with various entities, and the selective enforcement issue with Karen's husband. The defense tried to argue that the HOA was just following its bylaws and didn't realize it was illegal. But the prosecutor pointed out that reasonable people understand you don't interfere with emergency services during a blizzard. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. Judge Martinez scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. I was back in court for sentencing. Karen stood before the judge, her lawyer beside her. She looked smaller than she had in the HOA office that snowy morning. Judge Martinez reviewed the case file. "Miss Eckhart, what you did was not just a violation of the law. It was a profound failure of judgment and common sense. During a declared state of emergency, you chose to enforce a petty rule rather than consider the safety and welfare of your community. People needed their driveways cleared to get to medical appointments, to go to work at essential jobs, to simply be safe in their homes. You prevented that from happening." Karen's lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I've read your submission, Miss Eckhart. You are sentenced to 6 months in the House of Correction, suspended with 2 years of probation. You will perform 200 hours of community service with a disaster relief organization so you can learn the importance of emergency services. You are permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You will pay a fine of $1,000 and restitution to Mr. Iverson in the amount of $5,000 for lost wages and legal expenses." Douglas Whitmore and Janet Russo received similar sentences. As we left the courthouse, Karen walked past me without making eye contact. Her husband, a bulky man with a red face, glared at me but said nothing. The HOA held new elections in June. My neighbor, a retired teacher named Patricia Moore, ran for president on a platform of common sense and community cooperation. She won easily. One of her first acts was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the HOA and rescind all restrictions on my commercial vehicle. "Henry, what happened to you was wrong," she said at the community meeting where the votes were certified. "This HOA should exist to make our neighborhood better, not to make life harder for our neighbors. We're going to do better." The meeting erupted in applause. Several neighbors came up to me afterward to apologize for not speaking up sooner, for not supporting me when the news broke, for believing Karen's narrative that I was just a troublemaker who didn't want to follow the rules. Life slowly returned to normal over the summer. My business actually grew because of the publicity. I hired 2 additional drivers and bought a second truck. Sarah went back to work part-time as a nurse, and Emma started first grade. The new HOA board was responsive and reasonable, fixing long-standing issues that Karen had ignored while she focused on parking violations and lawn height regulations. In September, I received an invitation to speak at a conference in Boston about HOA reform. The event was organized by a coalition of homeowner rights groups who were pushing for stronger state oversight of HOAs. I wasn't much for public speaking, but I felt like I owed it to other people who might be in similar situations. The conference was held at a hotel near the airport. About 200 people attended, including homeowners, lawyers, legislators, and housing advocates. I told my story, keeping it factual and unemotional. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, and soon everyone was on their feet. During the Q&A, a woman raised her hand. "Mr. Iverson, do you regret buying a house in an HOA?" I thought about it. Yes and no. I love my house. I love my neighbors, most of them anyway. But if I had known what would happen, I might have made a different choice. The thing is, we shouldn't have to choose between affordable housing and reasonable rules. HOAs can be good when they're run by good people. The problem is there aren't enough checks and balances when bad people get in charge. A man in the back stood up. "What advice would you give to someone dealing with an unreasonable HOA? Document everything. Keep records. Know your rights. Don't be afraid to escalate if you're truly being wronged." I got lucky that my situation involved a declared emergency and got the governor's attention. Most people won't have that, but there are resources. lawyers who specialize in HOA law, state housing agencies, local media. You don't have to face it alone. After the conference, a lawyer named Rebecca Martinez approached me. Mr. Iverson, I represent about 40 clients who are dealing with similar issues with their HOAs. Different situations, but the same theme of overreach and abuse of authority. Would you be willing to be interviewed for a documentary I'm working on? A documentary? Yes. About HOA abuse and the need for reform. Your case is one of the most clear-cut examples of HOA overreach I've ever seen. It would help a lot of people if you shared your story. I agreed. The documentary filmed over several months, with interviews at my house, at the impound lot where my truck had been taken, and at the State House. They interviewed Governor Mills, Trooper Hendricks, Fire Chief Crawford, Mrs. Patterson, and even Karen Eckhart, who was serving her community service at a Red Cross facility, and gave a surprisingly contrite interview about how she had let power go to her head. The documentary premiered at a film festival the following spring and was picked up by a streaming service. I watched it with Sarah and Emma, who was now 7, and thought it was weird to see her dad on TV. The film did a good job of telling not just my story, but the broader issue of HOAs that operate without adequate oversight or accountability. The response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some were worse than mine. People who had been fined thousands of dollars for minor violations. Elderly people forced to sell their homes because they couldn't afford HOA special assessments. Families torn apart by neighbor disputes, escalated by vindictive HOA boards. I couldn't help everyone, but I tried to respond when I could, offering advice or just a sympathetic ear. I connected people with lawyers and advocacy groups. I testified before the state legislature, twice more as they considered additional HOA reform bills. By the second anniversary of the towing incident, Massachusetts had passed some of the strongest HOA oversight laws in the country. HOAs were required to have independent financial audits, follow strict procedures for rule changes, and provide homeowners with clear appeals processes. The state created an HOA ombudsman office to investigate complaints and mediate disputes. Karen Eckhart completed her probation without incident. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved out of state, to Florida, where ironically HOAs are even more powerful. Douglas Whitmore still lived in the development, but kept a low profile. Janet Russo apologized to me at the grocery store one day, telling me she had just gone along with Karen and should have stood up for what was right. I accepted her apology. The following winter, we got another big storm. Not as bad as the blizzard, but still substantial. I was out plowing at 5 in the morning when I drove past the HOA office. Patricia Moore was inside and she came out to wave at me. I rolled down my window. "Just wanted to say thanks, Henry," she called over the sound of my truck. "Stay safe out there." "Will do. Thanks for everything, Patricia." She went back inside and I continued my route. Mrs. Patterson's house was first as always. She had hot chocolate waiting for me when I finished, like she did every storm. We sat in her kitchen and talked about her grandchildren and how the neighborhood had changed. "You did a good thing, Henry," she said as I was leaving, "standing up to them. A lot of people wouldn't have." "I didn't have much choice. I had a job to do." "That's what I mean. You knew what mattered. Not everyone does." I thought about that as I drove to my next job. What mattered? My family, my community, doing the right thing even when it was hard. Those were lessons my father had taught me, working construction in Lowell his whole life. Show up, do the work, stand up when you need to, simple rules but good ones. The fire station was next. Chief Crawford was waiting with his crew. They had shovels out, helping clear the sidewalks while I worked on the lot. "Henry, good timing. We were about to get called out for an accident on Route 119. You're all set now. Drive safe." As I worked through my route that day, I realized how much had changed in 2 years. Not just the laws or the HOA board, but the community itself. People were more engaged, more willing to speak up, more aware of their rights and responsibilities. The documentary had sparked conversations in living rooms and community meetings across the state. Some HOAs had reformed themselves, adopting more transparent policies and inclusive practices. Others had been dissolved or put under state supervision. My business had grown beyond what I had imagined possible. I now employed 8 people year-round, doing not just snow removal but landscaping, property maintenance, and light construction. Sarah had gone back to work full-time and was managing the business side, handling contracts and billing while I focused on operations. Emma was thriving in school, already showing signs of her mother's organizational skills and her father's work ethic. In March, I received another call from the governor's office. Governor Mills wanted me to serve on a new state task force examining HOA regulations and recommending further reforms. I agreed, attending monthly meetings in Boston with lawyers, housing advocates, HOA board members, and other homeowners. The work was tedious but important, reviewing hundreds of pages of regulations and case studies. We published our recommendations that fall. The task force proposed mandatory training for HOA board members, stricter financial controls, independent oversight of enforcement actions, and clear protections for homeowners' due process rights. The legislature adopted most of our recommendations the following session. I was at the State House for the bill signing again. Governor Mills shook my hand and posed for photos. "You've made a real difference, Henry. Not many people can say that. I just wanted to do my job and take care of my family. Everything else kind of happened." That's how change often works. One person standing up for what's right, and suddenly, everyone else finds their courage too. The years that followed were good ones. My business continued to grow. Emma grew into a confident, kind young woman who wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. Sarah became active in state politics, eventually running for and winning a seat on the town council. We moved to a new house, a beautiful old colonial on 2 acres with no HOA, and I could park my trucks wherever I wanted. I stayed in touch with the people I had met through the whole ordeal. Trooper Hendricks became a sergeant and sent me a card when she was promoted. Chief Crawford retired and I attended his party, where he told the story of the towed plow truck to anyone who would listen. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at 92, and I was honored to be a pallbearer at her funeral. Patricia Moore remained HOA president for several years before retiring to spend more time with her grandchildren. Under her leadership, Westridge Commons became a model for how HOAs should operate. They focused on maintaining property values and common areas while respecting homeowners' rights and privacy. Violations were handled with warnings and education, not immediate fines. The board published detailed financial reports and held regular town halls where residents could voice concerns. 10 years after the towing incident, I was invited to speak at a national conference on housing policy in Washington, D.C. The event was huge, with thousands of attendees from across the country. I told my story again, though by now it had been refined through dozens of tellings into a tight narrative with clear lessons. "The thing about HOAs," I said to the audience, "is that they're a uniquely American institution. We want community standards and property values protected, but we also value individual freedom and property rights. Finding that balance is hard. It requires good faith, common sense, and accountability. When those things break down, you get situations like mine. The solution isn't to eliminate HOAs. It's to make sure they operate within appropriate legal and ethical boundaries. After my talk, I was approached by a producer from a national news program who wanted to do a "Where Are They Now" segment about my case and its impact on HOA reform. I agreed, and the segment aired a few weeks later. It was strange seeing myself on national television, sitting in my living room talking about events from a decade ago. But the producer told me they received thousands of responses, many from people sharing their own stories and asking for help. I started a non-profit organization, the Homeowner Rights Advocacy Group, to help people navigate disputes with their HOAs. We provided free legal consultations, connected people with lawyers, and advocated for legislative changes at the state and national level. Sarah managed the organization, and we staffed it with volunteers, including several lawyers who donated their time. The organization grew quickly. Within 2 years, we had chapters in 15 states and had helped thousands of homeowners resolve disputes with their HOAs. We published guides on homeowner rights, HOA governance, and conflict resolution. We trained mediators who specialized in HOA disputes. We lobbied state legislatures to adopt stronger oversight mechanisms. Not every case had a happy ending. Some people lost their homes. Some disputes escalated into violence. Some HOAs were so entrenched and powerful that challenging them was nearly impossible. But we won more than we lost, and even the losses taught us valuable lessons about where the system needed to change. Karen Eckhart reached out to me 5 years after her conviction. She sent a letter to my office, forwarded by Patricia Moore. In it, she apologized for what she had done and explained that serving on the HOA board had given her a sense of power and control she had been lacking in other parts of her life. She had been dealing with a difficult divorce and health problems, and enforcing rules had been a way to feel like she mattered. She understood now that she had hurt people and was deeply sorry. I wrote back, accepting her apology and wishing her well. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but holding on to anger wasn't healthy either. She had paid her debt to society and lost her position and reputation. That was enough. Emma graduated from college and went to law school, just as she had planned. She specialized in housing law and joined our organization after passing the bar. Working with my daughter to help other families was one of the greatest joys of my later years. Sarah served 3 terms on the town council before running for state representative. She won and spent 6 years in the legislature, where she continued to work on housing issues and HOA reform. We became a team, tackling the problem from different angles, each using our skills and experiences to make a difference. I continued running my snow removal and property maintenance business, though I spent less time in the trucks and more time managing operations and training new employees. We became known for quality work and fair pricing, and we never forgot the mission that had started everything: providing essential services to people who needed them. 20 years after the towing incident, Massachusetts had become a national model for HOA reform. Other states adopted similar laws, and the federal government began exploring national standards for HOA governance. The documentary about my case was used in law schools and urban planning programs as a case study in grassroots advocacy and policy change. I was invited to the White House to attend a signing ceremony for a federal HOA reform bill that incorporated many of the principles we had fought for in Massachusetts. Standing in the East Room, watching the president sign the legislation, I thought about that snowy February morning when my truck had been towed. I never could have imagined where that moment would lead. After the ceremony, I walked out onto Pennsylvania Avenue with Sarah and Emma. The spring air was warm and pleasant, cherry blossoms blooming along the mall. "Dad, you changed the world," Emma said, linking her arm through mine. I just stood up for myself. A lot of other people did the real work. "That's how it always starts," Sarah said. One person refusing to accept something wrong. We walked together through the city, three people who had been changed by an HOA dispute into advocates and activists, our lives forever altered by a single act of bureaucratic overreach and the decision to fight back. The fight continues. There are still HOAs that abuse their power, still homeowners who face unjust treatment, still systems that need reform. But things are better than they were. Laws are stronger. Oversight is more robust. People know their rights. And when someone faces an unreasonable HOA, they have resources and support that didn't exist before. I think about Chief Crawford's words sometimes, from that first morning when he called to say the governor's office was getting involved. Things going higher than local police. None of us could have predicted how high things would go, or how far the ripples from one towed truck would spread. My plow truck is retired now, sitting in my garage with over 300,000 miles on it. I could never bring myself to sell it. That truck represents something important, a reminder that standing up for what's right matters, even when the stakes seem small, even when the opposition seems powerful, even when success seems impossible. I still get calls from people dealing with HOA issues. I try to help when I can, offering advice or connecting them with resources. Each story is different, but they all share common themes: power, accountability, fairness, community. The questions are always the same. How do I fight back? What are my rights? Is this worth it? My answer is always the same too. Document everything. Know the law, stand up for yourself, and remember that you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who will come after you, for the principle that communities should be governed fairly, and that power should be exercised with wisdom and restraint. The snow comes every winter in Massachusetts. I still go out with my trucks, though now I ride with younger drivers, teaching them the routes and the skills they need. We clear Mrs. Patterson's daughter's house first, honoring her memory. Then the fire station, the medical offices, the homes of people who need help. It's good work. Necessary work. The kind of work that makes a community function, that keeps people safe and life moving forward. That's all I ever wanted to do, plow snow and take care of my neighbors. The fact that it led to something larger, something that helped thousands of people across the country, is gratifying but also humbling. I learned that one person can make a difference, but only if they're willing to stand up and fight, to endure scrutiny and criticism, to keep going even when things seem hopeless. I learned that most people are good and want to do the right thing, but systems and structures can corrupt even good intentions. I learned that change is possible but never easy, and that vigilance is the price of maintaining progress. Most importantly, I learned that home is more than just a house in a neighborhood with rules and regulations. Home is where you're free to live your life, pursue your work, and raise your family without arbitrary interference or unjust treatment. That's worth fighting for, worth defending, worth the struggle and sacrifice. My story started with a towed truck and a blizzard. It continued through courtrooms and legislatures, documentaries and news coverage, advocacy and activism. It ends here, in a better world than the one I started in, with stronger protections and fairer systems, with my family by my side and work that gives my life meaning and purpose. The HOA that towed my truck no longer exists in its old form. The people who ran it faced justice and learned hard lessons. The systems that allowed it to happen have been reformed, and thousands of homeowners across the country are safer and freer because one February morning, someone decided that towing an emergency services vehicle during a blizzard was unacceptable, and people in power agreed. That's the legacy of those events. Not anger or vengeance, but positive change that will protect people for generations. That's what makes the whole experience worthwhile. My trucks are parked in my driveway tonight, ready for the next storm, and no one can tow them away for doing their job. That simple freedom, won through struggle and sacrifice, is everything I fought for and more than I ever expected to achieve.